We're here in the JNU campus with Umar and Anirban, and we're going to be talking about their experience behind bars and now that they're finally out, what is happening on campus, and what the impact of this attack on JNU has been.
When we surrendered, day back, a Supreme Court order had come, which had told the police that while we were in custody, there should not be a scratch on our bodies. This had also come in the light of what all had happened with Comrade Kanhaiya in the past few days, and the way he was attacked, and the way the police stood as mute spectators. So that worked in our favor in the sense that when we were in police custody, the police did not physically harm us. But that is it. They did not physically harm us, but the rest was all there. Interrogation at odd hours of the day, verbal abuse, intimidation, humiliation, and all of that. I mean, that you seem to expect in police custody. They extended the remand period by thrice. First they had it for 3 days, then for 2 days, then for one more day by the special cell of the Delhi police. And actually, if you see, there was nothing, no basis on which the remand periods were being extended except for the fact that they were just producing us and the magistrate was agreeing to their demand of us, keeping us in more custody. In fact, not just 3 plus 2 plus 1, 6, but actually you can add one more day. The first day when we were not produced for the 20 hours later we produced for the magistrate. So it was actually a 7-day police custody. It was one of the most difficult periods of our lives, but thankfully it's over now.
The first 6 days were difficult. Interrogation, I mean, police custody is not the most democratic space where we could, where we would, where we would debate and discuss. We still did to some extent because basically there was nothing to investigate, so to speak. It was an open program. Whatever had happened in front of everyone, and I mean, there was nothing like ki kahan se kya hua and what happened and where did this come from, where did that come from. I mean, they had blown something absolutely out of proportion, so there was nothing to investigate, so to speak. So yeah, I mean, actually a large part of this stay was about getting sermons regarding nationalism. Every person, we heard that there were nationalism classes going on in JNU, and over there also I think a lot of class we underwent. Whoever would get a chance would give us a dose of nationalism. Of course, abuses, interrogations interrupted with. There was a lot of hatred, of course. I mean, I think much more than criminals, rapists, thieves, dacoits, scamsters, we seemed are worse than them. So that's how it was in the police custody. But amongst the lot, special cell was something which was more intimidatory, of course, much more intimidating, of course. But as he was saying that not a scratch was as per High Court orders, and we also feel our class background, our that fact that we were students in JNU, the fact that there was a media hype, and the fact that lots of civil society and intellectuals were behind us. I mean, we would say that these things played a part in the fact that as to how bad or worse we were being treated. Had we been something else, had we not been students of JNU, had we not been scholars or PhD scholars, had we not have had this support, or there are many qualifications in this, had we been not from this privileged class, what I'm trying to say is that we are a privileged lot. And I don't think someone educated in Stevens, someone coming to JNU after that, even he did his graduation in DU, came to JNU. I think these are privileges. 98% of this country doesn't have those privileges. The fact that both of us were not Muslims from Azamgarh, both of us were not Muslims from Bijnor. The fact that Umar is not a practicing Muslim. What if he was? These are questions. But the point is that these things did determine to a large extent as to what happened with us. It could have been worse, and I think it is our privileges that also came into being, and the support that we had. I do not know a random person. We have seen what was made out of Umar and how easy it is to say this and that and Jaish-e-Mohammed and Pakistan and all of that. But when someone is picked up from Azamgarh or Bijnor, just like him or just like me, I don't know how much of a support that person would have behind him or her. And I think interrogations would be uh, even more horrific in those situations. I, it was intimidating, quite intimidating, humiliating, but it could be worse.
Following up with what you just said about the fact that, I mean, just your names, you have a Muslim name, you don't. Did that come across in the way you guys were treated when you were in custody? Was that something that, affected the way that they treated you?
See, I think we've already said that the day when we came back also. I was Khalid Saab, he was Bhattacharya ji in jail. And this perplexed them that what is Bhattacharya doing here with Khalid Saab? Khalid Bhai. And Khalid Bhai, and that what he was told in one of the aside conversations the policeman had with him, that him doing it's understandable. Why are you into it? He asked him, why? Are you saying this because he's a Muslim? No, I'm not saying that, But the point is that we know what he was saying. And similarly, I also used to be given these lectures on how there are good Muslims also, and how there are patriotic Muslims like APJ Abdul Kalam, and they would take references from their friends and how good they are. There was one police officer, a Muslim police officer in special cell, so they would say that look at him, he says Vande Mataram and Bharat Mata ki Jai every time, look at you, तुम लोग तो जिस थाली में खाते हो उस थाली में छेद करते हो, and all of these things. Islamophobia was at its best during those interrogations. But the point to be made here is it was not just the police which did that. The police, we know, as Anirban has also said, the record of the police in terms of, let's look only at that special cell. It deals largely with terror cases. 70% of its terror cases, quote unquote, end in acquittal. To put it differently, 70% of the people they catch, they frame. And they torture, they do all of that, and all of that also, it's become so normalized, and what we could see in our interactions with them, very internalized to their way of thinking. So there's so much of hatred that even if you're beating up a person, you knowing very well that he's not involved, that's completely fine. But beyond that, there was also something more sinister, which was the role of the media. And when I say the police and the media, I don't think the two of them were acting independently of each other. The fact from 10th of February, the way the media trial began, and different news channels coming up with similar script. Say subsidy, you guys take subsidized education, you guys are wasting the taxpayers' money, why are you guys into politics, you guys are supposed to study, anti-national, the kind of taglines that the different news channels are playing, Afzal League, Afzal Premi Gang, Pro-Afzal Group. I don't think the media was acting independently. A section of them. I don't think a section of that media which was doing a vitriolic media campaign against us, they had instructions from above, which was reflecting in similar scripts being played out. On the 4th and the 5th day, after Kanhaiya's arrest, when they brought this Jaish-e-Mohammed link, it was NewsX which brought that in the beginning. It created a different impression altogether. NewsX not only played that on its television, they retweeted it one entire day, so much so that it was to the top trend in Twitter for one day. That Umar Khalid is a Jaish-e-Mohammed sympathizer who is one of the JNU students who did the Afzal XYZ program. And that had changed perceptions completely. Even though the fact that government had brought a report the next day saying that there is no IB input like that, the media did not issue a disclaimer, let alone an apology, did not play any disclaimer on its television, and it created two perceptions being already made. And the perceptions were already made, and which was reflected in the police interrogations. The police operates with a lot of bias. The police has operated with a lot of bias. In all these years, in the last 20, 30 years, ever since this war on terror has been played out, what adds fuel to the fire is the media campaign. The trial, we were not arrested, we were already branded certain things. We were not interrogated even once, it was already said. It seems, आजकल उल्टी गंगा बह रही है. मतलब पहले the police used to investigate, used to hand over the results of the investigation to the media, and actually a good press should not even uncritically reproduce what the police is handing over. They should also question it. But that used to happen earlier. Now it's the other way around. It seems the media does the trial, hands it over to the police, and then the police takes that as a point of departure and goes ahead with it. In fact, in this particular instance, that's exactly how it has happened, and happened very blatantly, very openly, with media houses taking a lot of pride in the fact that they have done this. Zee News has run channels, has run shows, saying that it was on the basis of the footage we provided, it was on the basis of the interviews we did and the footage we provided of those interviews that these arrests have happened. And when will more arrests happen? So if there was a lynch mob in this particular case, the media was the biggest lynch mob. And who gives Arnab or anyone a right to call anyone anti-national? See what Arnab has done and what this Z News has done. One of the reasons why after coming out we have not spoken to the electronic media, because you never know, they'll play out one sentence, they'll not play out the other sentences. If you're saying something they don't agree with, they'll shut down the volume. And what you are trying to say and what ends up on the television screen is something totally different. And then they play it and replay it all for 2-3 days, creating a frenzy, creating a lynch mob around that. Now, because of the role of Times Now, Z News, it created a frightening situation, not just for me but also for my family members. My sisters were getting rape threats. My father got a death threat from Underworld saying that he will kill my father and me both. Even my 12-year-old sister who could not initially fathom what was happening, she got death threats that will kill you as well. So this situation, if tomorrow something happens to any one of us, if something happens to me or my family members, are all these media channels going to take absolutely any responsibility for that? And in this particular incident, it has come out. This is, as Anirban said, we have a lot of privileges by being JNU students, by being political activists who are very well known, who have been with students, who have been with different people's movements, and who have a lot of contacts. And these people who knew us could stand up for us. What if he was just an ordinary guy from a small town living in a Muslim mohalla? Then there are very few people to stand up for you. And they've done all of this in the past, and it's happened too many times. Media ethics, journalistic ethics, accountability have gone to the dogs. But this time, they cannot get away with it. They will have to answer for each of the things that they've done.
We think that the order that we have had, I think it's a good order. Particularly as in comparison to Kanhaiya's, because I mean there was a lot of conditions in Kanhaiya's, and I think there were much more than conditions also in that mail order. I think our order is a good order, and I think it also vindicates the things that we have been saying. It also vindicates the things that the people who have been standing with us has been saying for all this for this entire 1 month. It's a vindication of that, and no, it doesn't have those silly conditions as has been put on Kanhaiya. Of course, we cannot leave Delhi without the permission of the court, and that too is regular. This entire matter did not even merit an arrest, forget about sedition or everything. So, forget about spending time in police custody or jail. The manner in which it was made out to be, and what we have had to undergo, what even Kanhaiya has had to undergo, the conditions that has been put on all these things, it's rather unfortunate, and let's see what comes across from here.
See, Kanhaiya is the symbol of the movement. Kanhaiya is a JNU president. He was the one who was arrested the first. He was the one who has undergone a lot of extremely traumatic experience in terms of the way he was beaten up in front of Patiala House Court and what he was subjected to. In terms of this debate, we became aware of this debate when some people came to meet us. Kanhaiya not doing enough, there not being enough campaign, which we don't think was the case. Because if that was the case, what we heard, there was a march just 2-3 days back before we were released. There was huge mobilization of students once again. Of course, you cannot have the mobilization as you had in the first march all the time, because it was still very, very, very fresh. But even this time, almost the entire campus went out in that march. There were people from different parts of the city who came out in that march. So there was this thing that he's not speaking about this, he's not speaking about that. You cannot expect Kanhaiya to speak about everything at this juncture. And it's not only Kanhaiya's responsibility also, there are so many others to speak about. And I think the way the unity, the entire student organizations, the students union, the teachers association, and not just organizations and unions and associations of JNU, but of the city and beyond the city, of the country and beyond the country, in different parts of the world, the solidarity that we have got, the unity that we have seen, it didn't end with Kanhaiya. The unity continued. I think the TA and the SU made it quite apparent in the beginning itself that we are not going to call this movement off until unless every student is released. And today, when we are out, it shows it was only on the basis of that unity that we came out. So I don't think a lot should be made out of these things. It's been a difficult time for each one of us. Each one of us cannot be expected to do all the things at this juncture.
I'll just add on to this, and I stayed in Kanhaiya's cell after Kanhaiya got bail. We were shifted. He left a message for me, for us actually, saying India, the largest democracy of the world. Let's think, because equality is indispensable for democracy. We met once during the joint interrogation in Rakipuram. What all we have had faced by then, Kanhaiya had been facing much before us. He was the one who was picked up as JNUC president. The manner in which he was handled in Patiala court, we only got glimpses of it through newspapers and TV. Beyond that, he was alone during that phase. The manner in which he stood up to the media trial that was going on, and beyond that, finally, once we met for the first time during the joint interrogation, we got just a little bit of window space. After the interrogation, we could speak to each other. He told comrade, we will all get bail. It might take a while, but we will all get bail because we have done no wrong. But meanwhile, you have 4 months for your PhD left. Come what may, even if you have to write it from jail, it is important that you write your PhD, because you are a student as well as a political activist, and you must do this. I felt really good about what he said. We have known him for a long time. Now we also know that the matter was sub judice. There was a lot of conditions on him. I think he was leading, after he came bail, he was leading the movement as the JNUC president. There was a march and many other things that he was leading. As a JNUC president, once he was leading it, there were hordes of students and teachers who were speaking about us. Even he was. If he was speaking less or speaking more, I don't think one needs to get into that. One needs to understand that the people whom he were leading did not have those conditions on them. He had. Matter was sub judice. So beyond that, I don't think one need. Apart from that, there were others who were speaking about it, and I don't think one needs to make an exception out of him and say that whether he was saying enough or not. I think he did lead it as a JNUC president.
We've heard a lot about Umar's family facing a lot of hostility during this time. Your father came out in support of you. I think he gave an interview at some point, and at one point. Did your family also face a lot of hostility in comparable terms?
Once this entire thing started post 11th, what I got to know later, once I met my father first time in the police custody, he was visibly shaken. Visibly shaken. He was trying to put up a brave face, but it seemed he had aged 2 years in those 10 days. Particularly the time that we were in hiding was most difficult for our parents. But as I heard, apparently there was a kind of social boycott of my brother's house where my parents were also putting up for some time. But difficult as it may have been for my parents, difficult as it may have been as opinions were generated, the effect that media trial had on even neighbors and the neighborhood. But I think it is nothing comparable to the to what Umar's family was facing. When in police custody, his parents came to meet Umar. I also got to see them. They were braving it pretty boldly, I would say. The first interview that I saw of, this pathetic journalism that was visible in that first interview, in the manner in which the person in the studio was talking to Umar's father, कि क्या आप माफी मांगेंगे क्या, and all of these kinds of questions, it must have been so much more difficult for his parents. And as he was saying that the death threats, the rape threats, the kinds of things that were being said about him and his family, and the kind of things that we have seen happening to Muslim youth in this country, I think there were good reasons to fear, because you don't need to do anything for something to happen to you, particularly if you're a Muslim youth in this country. But as I met them for the first time, I found them to be much better shape than my father was, and I think the reason behind that is, as a community, we have faced so much of targeting, so much of witch hunt, so much of branding, that it is his family that of course were facing the 99 or 98%, 99% of the threats and the targeting, much more than, I mean, nothing comparable to what my parents or family had been facing. But at the same point of time, a community that has seen so much of this happening, of course no one can be ready or prepared enough to face that when your own son or daughter is involved. No parent can do that, but still as a community I think they have seen so much of it around. I mean, they stay in Zakir Nagar, they have seen Batla House, they have seen so much of it around them. I would say that they were to some extent bold enough to face that, than I think a middle class Hindu upper caste family who doesn't know what witch hunt means. I mean, what is the W of witch hunt? So I would say, and I think both the families gave each other support in this difficult time.
I'll just pick up one small point which he also said, let's repeat that. This paradoxical situation that we are facing, that a Muslim name arouses more vitriol and a more vicious media trial, and as compared to a Hindu name, but at the same time, something like Anirban's brother's house being boycotted by neighbors, and a completely opposite thing happening with where my family stays in the neighborhood around. A sense of community feeling taking over, where a sense of solidarity coming in at that time. Look, it's happening to this person's son, and we've seen this happening again and again with Muslim youth, and it's happening to his son, and we have to go and support him. So rather than a boycott, you'll have more people coming to your house, people whom you have not known coming and expressing solidarity, which happened, coming and expressing this support, expressing this desire to asking my parents, if you need anything, call us at any point of time, we are there, and so many people standing. It's a paradoxical situation where people come out in support, and that has to do a lot with what has happened in the past 20 years. I mean, if we take it beyond just our families and what we went through, and if we speak in terms of why was it happening, people have seen this happen enough, too many times. And a sense of a persecuted community, even when I met my family members after coming out, the kind of how emotional they were, imaginations run wild. This entire period was more difficult for them than actually it was for me. Especially the time when we were hiding from the lynch mob and not from the law. Their fear of me being picked up, kept in illegal custody, being produced in some unknown location somewhere. They take me to Jammu Kashmir, they show me arrested from there. And these things have happened. They'll pick you from here, they'll show you arrested from there. The fact that they'll keep me in illegal custody and they'll torture me like anything and make me sign confessions. The fact that I can be encountered. It has happened with so many people. The same kind of fears overtake you. And that leads to these paradoxical situations that the greater the witch hunt, the greater the fear. Because the fear is a collective fear. It's not a fear of one family. It's a fear of the community. Whereas in a different context, it can be a fear of one family and other families trying to dissociate from that family. Okay, this family is the whose son has gone wrong. On the other hand, the impression is that, okay, his son is being wronged. So these are paradoxical things that are there in a society, but paradoxes of our times, amongst the many.
I just wanted to add that it's not the entire neighborhood. There were exceptions who stood by.
You mentioned Kashmir. I was going to come to Kashmir. So there are a lot of people out there. First, not that it really matters, but what are your views on Kashmir? Because there are a lot of people asking. And secondly, there are a lot of people who feel like you weren't diplomatic enough about your views. And somehow that you should have been. That you should have recognized where you're coming from and that you should have been more diplomatic about your opinions. What do you have to say to that?
in
In
terms of Muslim
specific,
background.
in terms of your background, specifically you, what do you have to say to that argument that you should have, in cognizance of your own, identity, where you come from, been a little more diplomatic about expressing your opinion?
I'll answer this diplomatic part first. See, that's one of the very unfortunate things that are there in a society, where you think you have transcended your identity, where you think you have moved beyond your identity, and moving beyond your identity, you have taken up a political position on various issues, and not just on Kashmir, from a very Marxist-Leninist point of view, from a communist point of view, and that's what I've done for the last 7 years. Not just on Kashmir, on any other issue. It's come from a very Marxist point of view. Even on minority witch hunting, I'm not speaking as a Muslim there, I'm speaking as a Marxist there, I'm speaking as a communist there. But unfortunately, the thing that is there in our society is that even if you think you have transcended your immediate identity, there are moments, to quote Rohit Vemula, when you're reduced to your immediate identity. And this was one such moment. And even there, in police custody, for example, I mean, it happened in the media, we've just spoken about that. This policeman saying that, okay, Khalid कर रहा है, समझ में आ रहा है, लेकिन भट्टाचार्य जी आप ये पोजीशन कैसे ले सकते हैं? And when he asked, मैं कैसे नहीं ले सकता, क्यों, वो मुसलमान है, कैसे नहीं पूछ रहे हैं? नहीं, मैं तो ये नहीं बोल रहा. Then the police comes up with a very embarrassing defense of that. But we need to think about these things. Is someone coming from a particular background only supposed to speak things about that issue, issues pertaining to those things? Is Kashmir a Muslim issue? Or is it something else? I don't think it is a Muslim issue. Because if Kashmir was a Muslim issue, then how do you look at Manipur? How do you look at Nagalim? They're not Muslims living there. The problem that Manipur and Nagalim are facing, and the problem Kashmir is facing, I think there is more similarity between them than the issues Indian Muslims and Kashmiri Muslims are facing. So I think there is a problem in looking at Kashmir like that, and there is a certain projection of it. It delves very perfectly well within the larger Islamophobic campaign that's been going on ever since the collapse of the Soviet Union and Islam replacing communism as US's enemy number one, more so after 9/11 with this entire war on terror, Iraq, Afghanistan wars and all of these things. So the point is, as critical people, as students in a university space, and not just as students in a university space, as justice-loving people, one needs to try and look beyond this propaganda of the state machinery in India, as well as globally, the kind of propaganda that is there around Muslims, around Kashmir, around all of these questions. A lot of things baffled the police because they know nothing about JNU. There is just prejudice. They don't know the fact that pamphlets is a regular thing in JNU. It's not something like they're saying pamphlet likha tha. So pamphlet to is like every second day we bring out a pamphlet. Poster chapa tha. Poster kahan se chapa? That's a poster. So we bring posters every day. So when pamphlets and posters, see, one of the charges against us is criminal conspiracy. So if bringing pamphlets and posters is part of a criminal conspiracy, then it's a very, what is that? What tragicomic situation? It's a theatre of the absurd that was going on. So they were baffled by these regular things and things students do regularly in JNU, which they have absolutely no clue about, and that only baffled them. So whenever we're talking, for example, I'll give you a very funny example. They asked us what happened on 9th of February. So I recounted the entire turn of events. After that, I said that around 8:30 it was over, and 9 o'clock we had an all-organization meeting on a different issue around student union elections. And what would be, I said there was an AO. And what should be the guidelines for the students' union elections? He said, what's an AO? I said, an all-organization meeting. What is an all-organization meeting? He said, all-party meeting. What is an all-party meeting? Then someone said, Arey sir, wo JNU ka Hurriyat conference. So the point is, they know nothing. These are usual things, and that is what was baffling them. But the point that is important here, it might have baffled them, but about knowing nothing about JNU. But what one saw in terms of their attitude towards JNU is a lot of prejudices. Similar prejudices operate when it's a Muslim guy. Here, JNU, you guys do nothing, you guys don't study, you guys are only interested in politics. If you want to do politics, why don't you quit JNU and join mainstream politics? And you live on subsidy, you live on taxpayers' money. You are picking, one policeman came and said, you guys pick up cheap issues, like rape of women. 90% of rape cases are false. Do you know that? So all the stereotypes, all the prejudices, patriarchy, class, caste, region, religion, nationality, everything perfectly coalescing into each other, and our complete being completely nonchalant about certain things which they thought were big controversies also baffled them a lot.
As he said, this thing was in those summon sessions. This thing was very वो that कि तुम लोग जेनू में क्या करते हो? I mean, क्या ये इनकलाब जिंदाबाद करते रहते हो and all of that. So why don't you just study, get into a career and देश के काम हो? So we said that ki what do we do in JNU? And we actually had these discussions. So for instance, at one point of time I said that ki Zee News showed something that has become a countrywide issue. When my friends and comrades, 4 of them got rusticated because they were fighting to ensure minimum wages for the workers that are working in this university in 2006. And that it was that struggle where thousands of students rallied behind them, and by 2007 the minimum wages for these workers in this university was ensured. Did Zee News come and take that footage? No. I said that ki in this university it has the most inclusive and democratic admission policy. People from the interiors of this country like Vidarbha, Palamau, interior parts of Odisha, Jharkhand, Maharashtra, they can come here and study because by a system called quartile points they are given 5 extra points. Women get 5 extra points. There are 60% of the population, student population is women. These quartile points, deprivation points, even before reservation was implemented, we had deprivation points for oppressed section, people come from oppressed castes and OBCs. I say ki these are things that are not shown by Zee News, and these are things probably that you don't know. But the fact that ki it is us who are ensuring, university has not given this. These are things that the teachers and students have collectively fought for, and every year we fight to update the quartile points. Every year we fight to update the more amount of interior regions that we can reach out to. We ask that ki these are things that happens in JNU. Are these anti-national things? For instance, there is so much that has been fed. A constable asked me that बाकी सब तो ठीक है, लेकिन ये जो 3000 कॉन्डोम मिलता है हर रोज, ये क्या है? तो I asked him that कि I don't know about 3000. I'll tell you something. The government spends crores of rupees in advertising that use condoms, have safe sex. It is out there in the TV everywhere. The government is spending money. Now, अगर एक यूनिवर्सिटी में अगर वहाँ पे जागरूक लोग हैं, if there are conscious educated people who are doing that, is that anti-national, or is using condoms anti-national or not using condoms anti-national? If so, then you drop those advertisements, those anti-national advertisements that the government itself is doing. So actually this person said that he thought for a while. He said that makes sense. और वैसे भी मतलब 18 से 30 साल की उम्र में लोग सेक्स नहीं करेंगे कि 60 साल के ऊपर करेंगे. एंड ही एक्चुअली सेड दैट कि हाँ, बहुत कुछ ऐसे बोला जा रहा है बाहर जो शायद थोड़ा लोग सोचे तो फिर उसमें पॉइंट है. एंड एज आई सेड दैट कि एवरी पर्सन हु वाज कमिंग इन वुड थ्रो इन अ लेक्चर ऑफ nationalism. So even in for those 3 minutes that a doctor is coming from Safdarjung checking our blood pressure and blood, in those times 3 minutes also he will say क्या करते हो and this and that. This guy suddenly one day stopped him and said, sir जी, इनके साथ 5 मिनट बैठ जाइए, आपको लगेगा ये सही कर रहे हैं. So if people hear, if people listen, it's not that difficult to communicate as to what JNU is, what we are doing. But if you have already made up your mind, and that's what the media has done, whether stereotyping a skull-capped wearing bearded Muslim as a terrorist or a JNU person as an anti-national, it is so indoctrinated in people's mind, it's difficult to get penetrate. So anyways, 3000 कॉन्डोम मिलता है हर रोज, ये क्या है? तो I asked him that कि I don't know about 3000. I'll tell you something. The government spends crores of rupees in advertising that use condoms, have safe sex. It is out there in the TV everywhere. The government is spending money. Now, अगर एक यूनिवर्सिटी में अगर वहाँ पे जागरूक लोग हैं, if there are conscious educated people who are doing that, is that anti-national, or is using condoms anti-national or not using condoms anti-national? If so, then you drop those advertisements, those anti-national advertisements that the government itself is doing. So actually this person said that he thought for a while. He said कि that makes sense. और वैसे भी मतलब 18 से 30 साल की उम्र में लोग सेक्स नहीं करेंगे कि 60 साल के ऊपर करेंगे. And he actually said that कि हाँ, I mean, बहुत कुछ ऐसे बोला जा रहा है बाहर जो शायद थोड़ा लोग सोचे तो फिर उसमें पॉइंट है. And this guy, and as I said that every person who was coming in would throw in a lecture of nationalism. So even for those 3 minutes that a doctor is coming from Safdarjung checking our blood pressure and blood, in those times 3 minutes also he will say क्या करते हो and this and that. This guy suddenly one day stopped him and said, Sir ji, इनके साथ 5 मिनट बैठ जाइए, आपको लगेगा ये सही कर रहे हैं. So if people hear, if people listen, it's not that difficult to communicate as to what JNU is, what we are doing. But if you have already made up your mind, and that's what the media has done, whether stereotyping a skull-capped wearing bearded Muslim as a terrorist or a JNU person as an anti-national, it is so indoctrinated in people's mind, it's difficult to get penetrate. So anyways.
Do you think those attacking JNU have achieved what they wanted? What do you think the impact? Do you think the people who are attacking JNU, I'm not going to say who's attacking JNU, do you think they've achieved what they wanted to achieve? Do you think they've achieved part of what they wanted to achieve? Even if, you know, we feel that all of you being out, even if the campus feels that all of you being out are victories, do you think they've achieved what they wanted? What is the impact of this attack?
It's a very good question. See, to answer this in yes or no would not capture the complexity of a country today. The answer is both yes and no. A country is characterized by uneven development, so a thing can have one response in one part of the country and another response in another part of the country altogether. You might feel that sitting here in JNU or going to different universities of the country today that they've not been able to achieve, we have shown them their place. We've fought back and we've won. But in another part of the country, you might go and you will find a different response altogether. And that's both of the things have happened simultaneously. Certainly it's a major victory for us, the way JNU was profiled, the way even before the arrests and all happened, the shutdown JNU campaign had begun. And it was not, it's actually a very good question because it was not about one incident that happened on one particular day. It was an attack on JNU and an attack on everything that JNU stood for. And we fought them back. Each of the lies we threadbare, scrutinized them, we rejected them, and the students in the campus rejected them. They were big. In fact, this movement brought a lot of people into active politics, which we as activists might not have been able to bring them into active politics. So that these are big achievements of the movement. At the same time, what the BJP has actually been able to achieve through this movement, and they've been trying this for some time, it did not start with this movement. They did the same thing with Rohit Vemula also. Rohit Vemula and his comrades in Ambedkar Students Association in Hyderabad last August when the entire thing started. They called them anti-national. They called the University of Hyderabad a den of anti-nationals. And they are doing that. They did that again with JNU. But the magnitude with which they did this campaign, they found a new trope for polarization in this country, which is the national anti-national. It's the same communal binary only, but repackaging it as, okay, we are not talking about Hindu, we are not talking about our party's interest, we are talking about the country's interest. And country becomes this abstract phenomenon where it's given meaning in this campaign by what the ABVP and the RSS want and the BJP want, the entire Sangh Parivar wants this country to be. That vision. And in fact it's a much more deadly trope, because unlike a Hindu-Muslim binary, the anti-national also includes the enemy within, like Bhattacharya ji and many others. And they've been able to achieve that. So this is the new thing that is emerging. One might feel JNU was a 1.5 months nightmare which has come to an end because students fought them well. But this trope is being employed in different ways in different parts of the country. So you have the Bharat Mata Ki Jai thing coming. Say Bharat Mata Ki Jai. You have this delving very perfectly well into the earlier campaigns of against cow slaughter, love jihad, ghar wapsi. So nationalism, patriarchal control over women, ensuring the caste system, ensuring communal tensions within the society. All of these is like very perfectly coalescing into each other and creating a deadly cocktail of hatred in our country. It will be complacent on our part to think that yes, we've had major victories in this period, but we have been completely victorious because major challenges are there in front of us. In fact, major challenges will begin after the entire thing will end in JNU. Right now, we are fighting to scrap the sedition charges. We are also fighting an internal inquiry committee here, the high-level inquiry committee. But beyond that, even if we are victorious, and we will be victorious in that, we'll continue our movement in that. What this movement, this historic movement, is going to give to the society will be determined in terms of how the people who have got involved in this movement move beyond when this movement comes to an end, and look at these different issues that will continue to plague our society, and these myriad forms of oppression, the positions they take, the fight backs that they do there, and those fight backs are very important.
What we feel is that one thing this government, I mean what it did, as you asked that ki whether they succeeded. First question is that ki what is it that they want to succeed in? Budget session was coming up, 2 years has gone, achhe din, and unemployment and this and that and this farmer suicides and everything, many things has been going on, many things has been plaguing. There is a frustration, there is a disillusionment with this promises that had been made. I mean, as it happens every 5 years once things change in this setup. But I think if you have to make an irrigation canal, if you have to generate employment, if you have to ensure midday meals, all these things require investment. Just before budget, I think jingoism comes for free, you don't have to invest. So this is the easiest way where all those frustrated people suddenly will stand behind you, because you will create an imaginary enemy. So jingoism is something that can be just ignited out of the blue, and suddenly you polarize. And sometimes you polarize by doing Muzaffarnagar, sometimes you polarize by doing this. And certainly there are electoral dividends that are being sought after. There was certainly a script, a completely well written script. It was orchestrated with the active support of sections of the media, police. Starting from RSS till the Gauraksha Samitis in Munirka, I think it was a well organized, and they are pretty well organized assault. Assault on JNU, not just JNU. Assault on JNU, because if someone, and none of our teachers, none of our students are actually in any illusion that this was about the 9th of February. Because as we saw in the TV channels, Mahishashur, Kiss of Love, खुले आसमान के नीचे लोग गंगा ढाबा में क्या सब करते हैं, and condoms and this and that, and so the sins of JNU had been accumulating over some time. Standing with every people's movement in this country, in every nook and corner, standing with every student issue, starting from Pinjara Tod to stand with Justice for Rohit, to Hokolorob, to every other thing that has been Occupy UGC, speaking up against the bogey of love jihad, and so many things, questioning the RSS, questioning the government, putting the most effective and articulate opposition to RSS and Modi. So, as the Panchajanya article in the Organizer, which had identified already in a year back JNU as a den of anti-nationals and this thing and that thing. So, this was coming for some time. So, if it was not 9th, it could have been 10th. So, that it was a proper, well-planned attack, not just on JNU, but every such university that is giving, where there is a political churning. Anti-national was not a branding that started with JNU. Anti-national had started much earlier. Anti-national was the thing on which Rohit Vemula's murder happened. Rohit Vemula was branded as an anti-national. Rohit Vemula after that was institutionally, orchestratedly murdered. And because he chose to fight back. Now, there is an effort to curb upon every such university space, not just JNU. Finish the autonomy and finish the politicization of every such and democratic space of every such universities, not just JNU. So yes, there was a plan, there was a script to it, but as we know, you have a plan, it glows according to the plan to some extent. You are trying to put the plan into force. But as we know, as per dialectics, there is, because you are going ahead with that, there are certain other things that start happening, which goes out of the script also. So yes, they have gone with the plan, they have polarized. They have been also successful in doing that, but also there are certain other things that has also happened that was not in the plan. Now, as when Anna Hazare happened, Arvind Kejriwal was not in the plan. It happened. It came out of it. Certainly, once they started with this entire script, the Kanhaiya speech after bail was not in the plan of Venkaiah Naidu or Rajnath Singh or Nagpur. Now, yes, they did that, but the immense, unprecedented solidarity. I mean, even till yesterday, there is a Azadi lecture that has been started. Partha Chatterjee was here. It's still going on. It will go on for some time. The unprecedented solidarity that democratic sections, students, and teachers have shown is not just heartening and emboldening, but these are things that are going to go down in history. Fascism is a very populist force. It came with populist support under Hitler also. There is no qualms about it. But it is during those times who stands up to it is what will be registered in history. And I think these people, we, JNU and all those people who are standing with JNU is going to go down in history as to when fascism was on the rise, who opposed it. And these will have its own impact as to how the country's future will be in the days to come, as to whether we stand up now or we don't. And I think, yes, they tried. Part of the script was also, for instance, some people said that part of the script, and we know that was to bury Rohit Vemula. But I think whether one is being able to bury it or not doesn't depend on the ruling classes or their plans. It depends on how do we respond to that kind of a strategy. And I think the plan in that context miserably failed, because I think Stand with JNU and Justice for Rohit together marched on the streets where thousands, it swelled and merged together. And I think the fight for justice for Rohit was only in the path of struggle, and that is precisely why these two streams merged together, because ultimately the enemy is the same. And I think on all those counts, the plan miserably failed.
They started saying that, so asking us in front of Kanhaiya, what was Kanhaiya's role? So we said Kanhaiya, and we've said this earlier also, Kanhaiya is the JNU president. He was not there, he came towards the end. When things were coming to an end, he was trying to separate ABP from the rest of the people. He said, no, but he's the president of JNUSU. Why did he give permission? I said, no sir, JNUSU president does not give permission. It is the authorities who give permission. JNUSU is not an administrative body, it's a body to fight the administration. He said, no, he's the JNUSU president, he's the one who gives permission. And I said, sir, see, Kanhaiya sitting here, he's the JNUSU president. He's not the president of the United States of America. So he's not the one with absolutely any power. This is a body meant to fight power. But these small things, many things, on one hand they'll talk about Desh ki Akhandata, Desh ki Ekta. Then on the other hand, the special would refer to the Naga battalion as the savage others. Okay, don't go them, look at them, they're so deadly, they're so dangerous, wo tumhe zinda acha kha jayenge, they eat human beings. And so, and the very next breath he'll talk about Bharat ki Ekta and Akhandata, in which we have actually threatened by through our political opinions. So all these contradictions of Indian nationalism, you saw everything, you saw all the prejudices, and these prejudices, for our safety's sake and for our security's sake, we did not reply to while in custody, but now we can laugh about those things. And for example, I've read this book by Arun Farera, Colors of the Cage, where he talks about how during his interrogation, the seniors used to interrogate him, torture him and do everything. At night when the seniors would leave, the juniors would get an opportunity to show that, okay, we are also there. And they would show their authority by doing everything that the seniors did, so that they get an ego massage out of that. We saw that firsthand. After the seniors would leave, then the juniors would start. Pata hai, aisa hai, waisa hi hai, wo hai. So this is their time, this is their moment to show their authority, and what better way to show their authority than to sort of humiliate us, insult us and all of these things.
This ludicrity I think has been covered by him. If it is the last question, then I would say that I'll say that yes, it was an experience, most of it intimidating, quite a bit of it humiliating, some bit of it scary also. Yes, it was an experience also which was very rich. There is a lot that we have taken back from those experiences. It was a rich archival material as a students of history. there were also some moments that we still carry which were different. If I am allowed to talk about that, then there were also then there were also guards, as I said, who would listen, who would talk, uh, whom we started talking with, and who we know who said that who would miss us once we are gone. We have also been said that you are the best people we have met in last 6 years of duty. I remember, I think you would know that the Art of Living show के दिन पे बारिश हुआ था. It was raining a lot, so I was sitting outside right at the near the bars. I was looking at the rain, and suddenly this guard comes up to me and gives me a paper boat. And I still have that paper boat. And while coming back, someone gave me this fountain pen as a memory. And these are things that has also happened. I mean, exceptions maybe, but these are also things that we take back with us. And there has been such nice and light moments with people over there.
Thank you so much. Thanks for your time.